Okay, so there's hundreds of these toxicants out there, environmental toxicants. It's weird, but I'm going to talk about some that are most well-known, let's put it that way. Most of these will affect domestic animals. But again, any toxicant that affects a domestic animal could affect us. But, you know, like the first one, sweet clover, none of us really eat much sweet clover, so even if it's bad, it wouldn't affect us, but it will affect, like, cattle. And I've got this first clip, I've got a neat little story about the author of this article. So let me show you. Yes?
What's the difference between a toxicant and a toxin?
Yeah. What's the difference between a toxicant and a toxin? And let me look it up because I never really try to remember, but there, you know, technically I think there is a difference. Let me look up toxicant. Oops, I can't do that one. That's a good question. Of course, go to my favorite dictionary. So in the right terminology, okay, a toxic agent. So that's not really a good definition, but let's try Google here. Because the thing is, I don't really, if you're into toxicology, you would know the exact difference. I kind of blur them together, but toxicant, sorry. Oh, here it is, toxicant versus toxin. Somebody else had that question, okay. Okay, toxins are natural products, blah, blah, blah. Toxicants are man-made. Okay, wow, okay, thank you for, see, together we can learn a lot. So toxins are natural products and toxicants are man-made. That's not bad to remember that difference. The point is they're all poisons, right? I mean, but that's good. Okay, so there's all kinds of these things out here, and we're going to talk about sweet clover poisoning. And this is from beef cattle and my good old buddy I.A. Shipper. So, you know, I got my BS and my master's at North Dakota State University. So I had this guy. He has crossed over a few years ago, but I've got this great story about him. And I'll tell you that before I get into the article. He taught the physiology class, like ANSI 230. That's where this is the guy that I got. And I think he also taught a virology class that I took. He was very easygoing. And he always gave, well, not always, but gave pop quizzes, okay? So one day in class, I wasn't in the class, he told us this after it happened. One day he goes, okay, let's have a little quizzy. So then he passes out this little quizzy, and people are groaning, it's harder and maybe longer than you would expect. And as people are getting done, they're handing him these little quizzies, right? And this one girl comes up to him, and this is his story, and hands him the quiz. And she goes, if this is a little quizzy, I'd hate to see your big testy. She said that to him. Isn't that funny? That's kind of funny, isn't it? Yeah, okay. That's what she said to him, and he got the biggest laugh because he must not have been offended because he was telling that forever. Okay, sweet clover. Well, sweet clover, you don't find much use for it in Indiana. It's not really your best forage. You'll see it in ditches sometimes. It's got yellow flowers, it's got white flowers sometimes. It grows taller than you. So you can get a lot of good tonnage of roughage. And notice the article was on beef cattle. You would never feed it to dairy cattle because dairy cattle need a pretty good ration to milk. But beef cattle, sometimes they just need things in their rumen for the microbes to work on, right? I don't know if you know it, but you could feed cattle ground up corn cobs and they'd get something out of it. Why? Because you're feeding the microbes and then the animal digests the microbes. And so part of the diet could be ground up corn cobs or some roughage that's not very good, and that's really sweet clover. If you let it get too big, I don't know what the protein content is, but it'd be pretty small. So out west, where there's more cattle, this is more prevalent. When I lived in North Dakota, there's all kinds of sweet clover. Remember, it's not the best, it doesn't compare at all to like alfalfa, but boy, you get the tonnage. So it's growing out there, and there's nothing wrong with it as long as it's not moldy. So here's the trick. You need sweet clover plus mold. Then you get the natural was, what was it, Toxin, right? And the man-made was Toxicant. I don't remember that. Okay. So you get this toxin that's an anticoagulant, basically. So moldy sweet clover acts as an anticoagulant, and then cattle start dying. Or hematomas start appearing, subcutaneous hematomas, and I'll define that in a little bit. So I.A. Shipper wrote this, and he said, poisoning is a problem varying, produced in sweet clover. Okay, it prevents blood clotting. And then the symptoms are, very general, but there's the word hematoma, it's on the far left there, down about 8 lines, right? Hematomas. So here's what the definition of a hematoma is. A collection of blood outside the vascular system, usually clotted, but not always. Okay, that's what a hematoma is. You might call it a bruise. The man on the street calls it a bruise, but on a test we would never say that. We would say it's a collection of blood outside a blood vessel. Usually clotted, but it doesn't have to be clotted, okay? And the thing is, if you've ever seen cattle, they're always butting each other. They're always, okay, I'm a boss cow, I'm going to go butt somebody right over the rib cage, boom. And sometimes I've seen hematomas, way bigger than a softball. And sometimes you just stick a needle into that mass and blood will pour out. Somebody's backing me on this. Did you see that too? Oh, yeah. Cows are always having this hierarchy, and the boss cow is always going around, we call it butting other animals to, show her rank. And it's just perfect for a hematoma, and it can be deadly if the animal has some problem with blood clotting. Anyways, you guys are going to read this, but here is the bad chemical right here. Dicoumarin. And the way I remember this is that's the bad chemical, but the chemical it's made from is called coumarin. So take the DI off there. So coumarin is in sweet clover, and if it's not moldy, it's got no property of anticoagulant properties. So coumarin is benign. But in the presence of mold, the mold changes it to dicoumarin, and dicoumarin is an anticoagulant. So, and then he talks about it crosses the placenta. You can have, even damage of the fetus. And if they're bleeding internally, the animal can die, and you don't have any idea why you died unless you examine the dead body. So when you examine a dead body for looking for the cause of death, what do you call that? Necropsy. So you might want to do a necropsy to see why. And if you did a necropsy in that animal, the abdominal cavity would be filled with blood. It would have bled to death, but there's no blood anyplace on the ground. Okay? So that happens. So here's what, and there's a couple articles on this, but here's what some of the takeaway points. Some of the plant breeders are smart, and they've been breeding sweet clover that has a very low content of coumarin. Pretty smart. Then if it does get moldy, you have less amounts of dicoumarin. Okay? And the other neat thing about dicoumarin, and it's in one of the stories, and I'll go to it in a second, but this is how warfarin was discovered. Everybody's heard of warfarin, the famous blood thinner? It was found, and it's patterned after this chemical dicoumarin. So that's pretty neat. So this bad thing that happened to cattle years ago resulted in the discovery of warfarin So anyway, what's the antidote? Vitamin K. So if you know you've got some hay that the cattle have eaten, there's several things you do. You could give them vitamin K, or you could dilute out the bad stuff. Because when you're out west and you have hundreds, if not thousands of cattle to feed, you cannot throw that hay away if it's moldy. You have to use it. You won't make it through the winter. Okay? So you dilute it out because in toxicology, that's a principle. Dilution is the solution. Okay? So you still have to feed it, but you can dilute it out with good stuff. Or feed, and I think some of the recommendations are, maybe feed it every third day or something. And if you know they have some of this stuff in them, then you avoid surgical procedures, like you wouldn't do any dehorning or castrations or anything like that that you might normally do. Okay? So there's all kinds of stuff. And what's kind of neat about it, it lasts 3 to 4 years in the roughage. That's pretty, stable, isn't it? Okay. But when you're out west and you have a lot of stuff, you would not throw that hay away unless it's just a couple bales, but a lot of times it's a lot of stuff. Okay. So vitamin K is a possible treatment, and you know what happens? Vitamin K targets the liver, and the liver makes blood clotting factors. So that's the antidote. All right? An antidote, right, is an agent that counteracts a poison. That's what an antidote is. And we talked about antidotes. I think, what's the antidote for carbon monoxide poisoning? Oxygen, and especially if you get it under pressure in the bariatric, what were those, hyperbaric, thank you, couldn't get it out, the hyperbaric chambers. So, some of these poisons, you should know if there's an antidote, okay? But again, if you have hundreds of cattle, you're not going to go out and inject them with vitamin K. You just can't. You probably can't even round them up at this time of winter. Okay, so let me get done with that, but A. Shipper, God bless him. Let's look at his name one more time. Where are you at? He was fun, a lot of fun. Okay, more sweet clover poisoning. This one is written by Merck Manual. I don't think they have anything, oops, sorry. Well, there's the plant right there. Sometimes yellow flowers, sometimes white, grows very large. Okay, and then, see now they call it Dicoumarin. That's the other way you're going to see it. The other article had Dicoumarin. This has Dicoumarin. Think of them as identical. They're not quite chemically identical, but it's close enough for us. Hemorrhaging, faulty, diagnosis, okay, continually, okay. Okay. Look at that beautiful word. And this is actually clinically what happens. There's hypoprothrombemia. And so the moldy sweet clover takes away prothrombin in the clotting cascade. So hypoprothrombemia. Emia means blood, right? Low prothrombin in the blood. Okay. See, and then they talk about treatments, but look at this. Maybe difficult in large animals. All these treatments are nice if you have 1 or 2 animals. If you're out with hundreds, none of these treatments are even possible. You can't get them. Okay, sub-Q vitamin K, yeah, may not be as effective as I am. Okay, cultivars, yeah. So they're looking for low. Okay, so you can read that, nothing new. So here it is. If you don't know how to spell warfarin, there's the spelling. Right up there. Now what's interesting is, this was worked out in one of our rivals, I guess I could say, University of Wisconsin. How many have ever been on that campus? University of Wisconsin? Oh, good. Have you been on the terrace behind the Union?
Yeah.
Isn't that nice? Yeah, the terrace behind the Union. You got to get there. I mean, of course, it's a rival, but go up there sometime because the bratwursts are very good. And the other B term too, yeah, it's pretty good. Anyway, warfarin, Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation. That's how they started that out. Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation. Okay. And I think this article, okay, so this was like in the 30s and 40s, this was happening. I think the first animals that were lost were up in Canada. Cows dying spontaneously. Okay. Okay, here it is. Okay. So there's the whole crux of the matter. Coumarin or coumarol goes to dicoumarol, a molecule in many plants that produces a sweet smell. And if you've ever been around sweet clover and like break it up or it's being hayed, it's got this sweet, nice smell to it when it's fresh. Okay. So let's see. So the first use was rat poison. Because a lot of the rat poisons are based on anticoagulant properties, right? The rat crawls through a hole, damages blood vessels, they can't clot, they bleed internally. You never see the blood, but they're dead. But if you did a necropsy, you see a lot of blood in tissue that you can't see unless you do the necropsy. Okay, and let's see. So there's a lot of new, if you watch TV, there's a lot of new anticoagulants that might be taking its place. I was looking for, there's this, yeah. So you're going to read this, but there's one more thing I was going to look for, and I don't see it right now. Okay, anyway. Okay, anybody got questions on the moldy sweet clover? I've got a couple of things I want to define, which I didn't do earlier. Half-life. Most of the chemicals that get into a body have a certain half-life. And you should be able to calculate, like, if I say chemical X has a half-life of 5 hours, and let's say we injected 100 milligrams of it, tell me when it's all gone. Okay? Or after 3 half-lives, how much is left? Because you got to remember, write this down, 2 half-lives does not equal gone. If something has a half-life of 2 hours, it's not gone in 4. And I should use a document cam and I'll show you that. Things are halving. So let's say we inject 100 milligrams of some chemical or poison or whatever, and it has a half-life of 2 hours. After 2 hours, there's 50 milligrams left. After another 2 hours, 25 milligrams are left. After another 2 hours, 12.5 milligrams are left. It's halving. Now technically, it's never gone then, right? But here's practically 10 half-lives equals gone. That's what's used out in the field. Radioactivity has a half-life. Some radioactivity just has, hours of a half-life. Some have 12 years as a half-life or even longer. So 10 half-lives equals gone, but you should be able to calculate that. And maybe I can put it on the document cam just really quick here. One of these tests. Just so visually you can see that. So here it is. What if something's 100 milligrams right now on a timeline, and it's got a 2-hour half-life? Then it's 50. Then after another 2 hours, it's 25. After another 2 hours, it's 12.5. Okay? So if I gave, on the test, we injected 100 milligrams of some poison on a rat, and it's got a half-life of 2 hours. What's left after 3 half-lives? The answer would be 12.5 milligrams. Okay? Or if it's 4 half-lives, it would be 6.25. And it gets small, but practically After 10 half-lives, it's gone. Okay. That's half-lives. Okay. Then the other term is biotransformation. Now that's a college term if you've ever seen one, right? Good job. Okay, this is where chemical compounds are transformed or changed to something else in a living system. I'm just reading that. So you could say coumarin undergoes biotransformation in the mold to yield dicoumarin. Okay? And you should be aware that sometimes molds do it, but sometimes your own body does it. And sometimes the most famous organ for biotransformation is what? What's the organ that you always think about biotransforming things? What? Your stomach. Well, that's a good guess, but that's not the one, that's not the go-to guess. Liver. You know, some people and some references say the liver has 500 functions. And if they count every enzymatic step, there probably are 500 possible reactions that are going on in the liver. Sometimes biotransformations take a toxin and make it less toxic. That's usually a good thing. Do you know what, though? Sometimes the liver takes a toxin or a chemical and makes it more toxic. There's some good examples, and it's on that list when we get to it, okay? So biotransformation, when a living system changes something. So, you know, could be good, could be bad. Usually I think it ends up being pretty good. Okay, so let's go back to this list, and I'm going to stop there because I got to talk about aflatoxin, and I don't want to start like with a little recording. So we're going to, oh yeah, but don't go yet. Let me think about when you leave. What did I say Monday? Down to here? Okay, so let me think. We got Monday. Okay, yeah, let's just go down to melamine. Stop at antifreeze, right? Is that what I said?
Yeah.
Not antifreeze, right there. Yes.
How's the exam going to be structured?
The exam structure, yes. Multiple choice. Is it 100 points? I can't even remember what the syllabus said.
Yes.
Because I've got an exam over here already, but it's for my other class. So it's probably going to be 33 questions out of 3 points each. And then everybody gets a 1 point spot, right? So 33 times 3 plus 1 is 100. And if you've had me before, it's kind of like the multiple choice I use in Anti 230, where there's 6 choices, and I'm really good at making wrong answers. And on the website, there are practice quizzes. Let me show you that real quick, in case we're, see how beautiful your questions are? Okay, oops, gotta get the cat out of the way. There it is. Okay, down here, quizzes. There it is. Gases, toxicants. 25 questions from a bucket of 95. Wow. I'm pretty impressed. Oh yeah, look at this. What's the answer to that one? Yay! 95 questions, at least. I can't remember if there's another quiz that's appropriate either, but that's my story and I'm sticking to it.